Hey guys, and welcome back to our live Q&A. We're doing Mental Health Mondays, live Q&As about different topics, and I'm excited to be joined by a good friend of mine, Kurt Bickel. I've known you for way too long. But my name is Megan Miessler. I'm the Executive Director at Legion Counseling Services, and this is my good friend, Kurt Bickel. Would you introduce yourself for a minute, sir?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And just to be clear, she's known me so long that Megan, you used to call me Mr. Pickle, I think is what you.
You didn't go there, did you? Went there. Oh man, I did used to call you
Yeah,
that.
indeed. Well, you were. That was a kind of a term of endearment, I hope. So anyway,
It was.
yeah. So yeah, I'm an old guy. Been around a while in the church first as a director of Christian education in Missouri and Ohio, and then here for 39 years here in Florida, and half of that was with Prince of Peace, Principe de Paz, as a director of Christian Ed. And then about 26 years ago, started my company, joined Cornerstone Consulting, 3 independent consultants, and we do a variety of things. And I'm also a certified coach with the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland, and yeah, do some stuff, mostly consulting work with organizations. And we do some training for leadership development too.
Great. Well, and I've spent a lot of time with you as a little kid when I called you Mr. Pickle. I think it was only like one time. And then as well as my time as a DCE and into my transition here at LCS, you've been a good support to me, and wanted to have a discussion with you about church workers. And we were talking previously or earlier here too about just people's view about church workers, or what is a church worker. So as Kurt and I have discussions today, would love for you guys to add some comments that we can talk about and discuss, talking about mental health and church workers. So Kurt, when I was a GCE, I remember going to the district office and talking about some services we were offering to church workers. And I believe I asked the question, because I don't keep my mouth shut. How do you define a church worker? And I didn't like the answer that I got. So putting you to a test, sir, what would you define as a church worker?
Well, I thought worker, the word worker says to me anybody who's getting a paycheck directly from the church, with the name of the church on the paycheck. I guess there's some vendors who do, but no, those who are part-time or full-time and have a working relationship, and not all the volunteers who are giving their time as an
Yeah.
investment.
And it comes in such a variety of roles, I think, from anywhere from the pastor, of course, but to the secretaries, to the janitors, to the business managers. I mean, it definitely encompasses, like you said, everybody who gets the paycheck. And so you said you served in the church for how many years, Kurt?
So total service in the church was about 18 years.
Okay. And what specifically for you do you think were some of your biggest challenges being a church worker?
Well, first of all, the biggest challenge is maturity. I mean, you come out.
That's a good one.
You come out with your belly on fire for changing the world in this imaginary world that you've created, and then you run into the reality. And it's amazing how long I worked on what I thought was going to work, and then soon discovered that the only thing that really seemed to work was the skills I knew about relationships. And back in the day, it was all about program, and we spent a lot of time building programs, and didn't do enough assessment about were they really reaching the goal, except for the goal of having a great program. So we measured it by how many people showed up rather than how much was changing in their hearts and minds. So but you can hear a shift in me, right? So that
Yes.
coming out of program, but the major challenge too was just other major challenges was team, working with team, and it's just the incredible complexity of the system we call the church, and how interconnected we all are in emotional ways that most organizations don't experience.
Well, and how I like what you said about relationships. I think every piece of the job of a church worker centers on relationships, either relationships with God or relationships with each other. But I remember the poll exactly like what you said of how was I measured as being a good CCE? And man, was it always so focused on numbers and program. How many people showed up, right? And not always even like the quality of what we were doing, but the numbers. And I agree. I think there's been a shift. It's hard for people to change that mindset. And it almost at times becomes a popularity contest, I guess, in some ways. And so as we're talking about mental health too, though, I know the question that comes up a lot in church workers that we work with, and even in some of the questions that we post out there this week, is the term burnout. And I know when I said to you, like, we're going to talk about burnout a little bit, it was burnout from COVID or burnout from other things. And so what are you seeing in the church workers that you work with right now? Is there a lot of burnout?
Well, yeah, I think there is. I think I hear that a lot about busyness and can't keep up, and a sense of being buried in everything that they've been asked to do or that they've
Mm-hmm.
set out to do. And so, that feeling of kind of being in chaos mode, like you don't really know where the end is ever going to be, and there is no end. So
Words of encouragement right here from us. Yes, there is
right,
no end.
right.
But
So
you're right, there isn't.
no, so you start having this sense, when am I gonna, that's just kind of what I experienced. So when am I gonna have this sense of completion?
Mm-hmm.
And part of the challenge of that is there's a way that we could plan where we could have more completion, but we usually are on to the very next thing. And I see that at my church all the time. I love my church. It's so active. And however, they're going from one thing to another, and you don't even get a chance to celebrate. So one of the things I really encourage groups to do and individuals to think about is closure.
Hmm.
So we're done with VBS and then we're on to the next thing, right? And I'm wondering if we just spent time to do a lot of shun words: adoration, thanking God, celebration, evaluation, and appreciation. So just taking the time to kind of gather the group together, or if even your own self, to think through now, where can we find ways to praise God? What did we see? Where did we see God doing stuff? Telling the narratives of, like, our rummage sale last Saturday, the narratives of just that interaction with a child. Uh,
Yeah.
some of the having fun with our members, and some of those moments were more important than how much junk we sold. And so have an appreciation, and then thank people, and then ask them for their feedback, right? So get some evaluation, so you have this sense of closure. So rummage sale's over, everybody can get off the bus.
Yep.
It will be a while before we ask them again. And for standing committees, they too need to close, even at the end of a meeting. We tend to just roll right into the next thing, and we don't give our souls a chance to be more present, be moving on.
I think when I was a youth leader, I very much remember, I think it's the book, The First 2 Years in Youth Ministry. It encouraged you to have a journal, and after like
Oh,
a lock-in or whatever, to write down your wins, things you could have done better, and who you want to thank. And I remember specifically, it kind of guided you into your wins not being numbers, but being those connections with people. But until you said that, Kurt, I never connected that as a way to kind of close that in my head, or to I like wrap it up, like you're saying. I think you're right in that, because I think burnout can definitely happen when we feel like we're just going, instead of like doing, closing, next
right,
start, doing, closing,
right,
next start.
right.
Um,
And
but I think that's a great tool.
Yeah, and I think that is a cousin to that is learning, and this is for me, learning how to be more present in the moment, because what if I kind of feel like I'm on this treadmill, I'm already anticipating before we take down the tables, I'm thinking about when I have to set them up again. And and that's because there's so much of me still already out here, and there's not enough of me here, because I'm anticipating this treadmill I'm
Mhm.
on. And when can I get a break? When can I get a break? Well, you could take a break right now. Drop your shoulders and breathe.
I
Uh,
think when I was transitioning into leadership here at LCS, and I don't remember exactly what you said to me, but you said something along those same lines of to be present. And I remember going back from an emergent leaders, and we'll talk about emergent leaders in a minute, and creating this habit for myself that like I got a to-do list and I got as much done, because as a therapist, it's so hard. I can sit there and be present with the client, but in the back of my head, be like, okay, when I get out of this session, I need to do this, this, and this. And then I've taken away from my client. And so I remember you saying about that being present and trying to really take advantage of the moment that you're in to make it a good quality moment. And we
yeah,
know from burnout is disassociating from what's going on in front of you. So like that's a big sign of
yeah,
burnout in church workers.
yeah, yeah. So it's not only that you're available for others, it really reduces. I think it reduces that anxiousness that you kind of built up,
Mm-hmm.
because there's enough grace in this moment. We hope there's enough grace for our future. No, it's usually for our past, for
Or past. Yes.
all the screw ups we did, and so that mercy follows me. And then we pray that there's enough goodness of God in my future, so that's covered. And if God's got the past forgiven and the future covered, then I could be more here.
Right here. Yeah.
Yeah, and that releases a lot of tension. That releases a lot of tension, because I let go of. I stop anticipating. I think you have to be ready, you know. But
And what you said, mature enough to recognize that you need to do it.
yeah, yeah. Well, and then the other thing that we all need to learn to manage is transitions. You talked
Mm-hmm.
about your transition. Well, life's difficult, but the transitions are really tough, and sometimes I think for there's a seasonal transition in the church,
Yes.
and I think that um, we need to recognize that what we do in transition and how we manage that is important as what we're going to do. Um, there's always a little bit of past that we carry with us. We're always anticipating the future, but if we like, I'm thinking off the ways yet, for my retirement. Okay, well, how will I manage that? And when Carol retired, it's not one day. So I'm thinking when you transition out of VBS then into Sunday school,
Yes,
we're talking DCE language, but
we are.
when you transition out of Holy Week,
That's a big one.
yeah, then that's a time to pause, reflect, and celebrate, and to manage the transition, into the next thing, and take assessment of how you're doing. The other
And
big,
you said it before.
yeah,
You said it before. Teams, like our teams and our churches transition. Not like you said, you serve on a board, right? And so
right,
your board transitions as leaders transition, or just as
yeah,
one person shifts
yeah,
on and off a team.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and that changes the dynamic, doesn't it? I mean, you think just one
Mm-hmm.
person, but it really changes, and that's true for volunteers too, for church workers working and trying to maintain relationships. And that's the other. Uh, I was always recruiting, so
Right.
so people see
Volunteers, leaders. Yep.
if
Mm-hmm.
people see me coming, right? They would just run for the corners, and I felt so awkward about that, um, until we built up the relationship, and we worked you got to work for something competent. You know, you have to really ask them to do something worthwhile and significant and expect their competence to do it, not, oh, this will be really easy.
I wonder for you, I always have this piece that's really important for me when talking to church workers because I lived it. So I lived as the pastor's kid. That's how I knew Kurt Bickel, Mr. Bickel, in my life. And so this whole piece of your who you are being tied to your job. More and more, I think that happens nowadays in other positions. But for such a long time, I was defined as a pastor's kid because my dad was a pastor and all the expectations that came upon it. And even my friends couldn't come to my house without saying, oh, your dad's a pastor, even if he wasn't their pastor, And so it's such a weird identity piece that I think our church workers struggle with or at times don't even recognize. So how did that manifest, or how did that look like for you, I wonder?
Wow. There's two things. If you have children, my kids, they went to Lutheran high school, and they called them the Flanders, this Homer Simpson neighbor who's always talking Jesus. And that was really hard on my kids, because their dad was a church worker, and and I did chapel over there, so that affects the family system. So you have that dynamic that you're managing this what you call fishbowl thing. But then you also mentioned this idea of your identity, and I think that's one of the greatest learning disabilities I have, is when I start blurring who I am with what I do, right? And so if my identity comes from my job, when you ask people, some people, their jobs are terrible, and I say, quit, and it's kind of like, I couldn't do that. I could never do that.
No.
And I think what they're saying is I'd stop being who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. If that's what you believe, you never could quit. You never could walk away. You could never do less, because now your identity is wrapped up in your success of your job. So I always I always want to say, I want to be in a place where I can quit tomorrow.
I don't know that I should say that on here, but yeah.
Well, I mean, just say that job's important for income, but it's not who you are. It's not who you are, Megan, right? And it's not. I'm not a
Right.
consultant. I'm not a consultant and a coach. I'm Kurt, and I got so many other things that define who I am. I'd like to think
such a hard piece, and if we can't separate it, I think of my husband. So we're trying to do a new bathroom, right? And he works for Lowe's and he's pretty high up. I'm like, well, let's just go check out Home Depot. No, we cannot. We are Lowe's people. I was like, oh, okay. But I think I probably do those things too. Like, no, I'm a therapist, or no, and so when it merges like that, I think it can be okay to some extent, but it can begin to become detrimental to your mental health. I want people to know Megan for Megan, that I'm, like you said, I don't hold anything back. If you catch me during a hockey game, you're going to get a whole nother side of me, but that's me as a person. And so I think especially in church work, it is hard to peel those layers apart at times and wonder how much we should.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is you're Megan, you're a different Megan at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would hope that, we all should explore who we are at when we're not at work. And if we can't do that, if we're always at work.
Right. And that was one of our other questions about the boundaries of work time versus family time, or just off time.
Right.
When I first started in this job, somebody well, Gretchen Jameson, and we had a conversation, right? And I was following in the feet of men in this role and wanting to do things differently. And the best advice Gretchen Jameson ever gave me was, don't you ever let the words "I'm sorry" come out of your mouth, because you have a commitment with your family. And I was like, oh, I never do that. And then the next day I was like, I'm sorry, my daughter has a volleyball game. I can't. I was like, I did it, So subconsciously, like, what am I communicating?
Yeah.
And how am I keeping my time boundary? So what did you do as a church worker? How did you balance your time?
Well, I just want to circle back, and so the narrative that you have, is that this job, the I'm sorry comes from that tape that you're running, right? In the narrative. So how do we change that narrative? So I basically did burn out. I was just really having panic attacks and other kind of issues that said something's going on here. And so I just made a pledge to my family. I said, I'm gonna cook supper, and when the kids come home from school, I'm gonna be there. Um, and I still, I added up the hours, and it was 50 hours or more a week. Um, but I just started coming home, of course, and going back for meetings. But I used to work until supper time.
Mm.
But and the biggest revelation of that, first of all, it was very awkward, very uncomfortable, really uncomfortable, because everybody else at the office was staying there till 5. But I said, I'm going home. Got to cook supper for my family. And that was, first one was how awkward it was to get used to. It took a while, but how delighted my kids were, that helped. Some delighted, some not so much. But
depending on what you were cooking.
well, we had a lot of they will all know the word Hoggenschleimer, because that's what I call it. It's just one dish, pan, throw it all together.
Everything together, yes.
Yeah,
you taught my father that, I'm convinced.
and anyway, so but what really was profoundly important is that I got more productive. And nobody missed me. So the idea that, somehow I won't get as much done, or I'm making such a difference here that those 3 hours are going to be missed. No, the system's already so geared up for overwork that I think the productivity and my health and everything had a rebound. And part of that was just I had a different place to be in the moment. And the more you practice that, the more restorative it is. But you got to admit, any change of behavior, even if it's good for you, is this is
uncomfortable. I wonder too, though, like I hear a lot of church workers saying, if my pastor is putting in the hours, if the leader of the congregation is putting in the hours, then I feel like I have to be there. So putting you on the spot, I don't know who was pastor then, but what did it feel like to kind of not be the lead of the team and set this kind of example? Did that lead to some of the awkwardness in it?
Well, yeah. So a couple things. The word leader for me is, I think that's an archetype. And we can, and then you add the word pastor to it. Now you got a double archetype. So first of all, be aware we're all leaders. Okay, and I'm managing my area, but I'm leading him and her, and I'm leading myself, and I hope they're leading me. And so it's this relationship piece, and I hope that my behavior has an impact, as long as I keep self-defining. I don't care what you're working.
Right.
So you tell me that's your definition of work. My definition is different, and I'm not going to judge you for less or more. But if I behave in a way that's more healthy, my system starts seeing that, I think, and it has an impact to change the system, because I destabilized. You make it, how come he's going home? And then,
maybe I should think about that. Who's cooking dinner at my house? Yeah.
And then that also helps live out the myth that DCs really don't have anything to do anyway. So.
That is not a myth. They always have things to do. Always.
Well,
I agree.
I don't envy a school teacher. I mean, compared to how flexible my hours were, the teacher certainly has a much more difficult hourly management, plus that home grading papers, and then she's also, or he's a part of the church, and that's the system that most teachers don't have to deal with. So anyway, I'm really speaking for self.
Well, I think it's important, as we talked about transitions on teams, when one team member begins to function differently, like you said, it destabilizes the system and everything has to shift. We see that same thing in family systems. Even the littlest shift causes the rest of the family to have to shift, like a daughter turning a teenager. That's causing this whole family in the Miessler house to shift. So
Yeah.
anything causes
Yeah.
shifts like that.
And the pushback, there's always a pushback.
Mhm.
So any change is going to have resistance. And so being real clear about what you want and sticking to it so you get through the discomfort.
And your boundaries on time and your boundaries on priorities, I think, is what, when you say like define self, like that's what you're defining for yourself, and then those other things play out.
Yeah. Well, and Robert Greenleaf, servant leader guy, he really said burnout is more about not having kind of a passion for what you're doing. Because if you're really congruent around what you want to do and be,
Mm-hmm.
and you're pursuing those, you get more energy, not less. So even if you're working 60 or you're working 30, depending on how you've structured it, um, the, the 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 burnout comes from my dysfunction of what I think I'm supposed to do or be. I think, um, and having this sense to want to measure up or or be successful in terms that are not really internal.
Right.
I
That
think,
are so much more based upon other people's perceptions or
yeah,
opinions.
are based upon the judgments, the judgments I allow people to make of me.
Mm-hmm. What do you, I know we're coming close on time, so I have a couple other things I wanted to chat with you about. But one that strikes me is I think a lot of people, I was telling you this, that maybe subscribe to our page or watch the things that we put out aren't all church workers.
Right.
And so when we talk about church workers and mental health, I always like to just, what would be encouraging, as being a church worker, being part of a congregation. I know you've come from a congregation that's had some difficulties with some mental health struggles in their leaders. So what do you think, as congregation members or people who just care about church workers, we should prioritize in at least checking in on the mental health of our church workers?
Yeah, I think that the idea of an elder kind of group, men and women who support, pray, who are in the inner circle, and I'm not talking about elders who are in a supervisory role, although there should be some supervisory roles in the organization, but a group of a trusted circle. And I would
Mhm.
encourage, I know, and I think the congregation people could really be helpful in that. And I think if I were still working in a church, I'd find a circle of people who are not a part of the church.
And those circle of people, Kurt, would be checking in on Megan Miessler, not on Megan, the DCE. Like, would
Yeah,
you say that those circle of people care about the person and not
yeah,
just the role?
yeah. And I would structure it not as this is pastor's healing time or this is the principal's healing time, but rather this is a support group, and we all bring our
Mm-hmm.
stuff. We all bring our stuff, and
Yeah,
you know,
mutual.
yeah, it's a mutual process, because I think that's what we try to create in emergent leader is that we're all learning, um, and that we're all on this together. So the facilitators and the presenters, we're presenting some models, and so that might be a level of expertise. However, the process of inner growth, we're all on that journey, and so um, So when we facilitate more everybody together, including facilitators, because that then we're not identifying someone we're fixing or helping. we're we're all in
That word fixing is such a word for me because I can get stuck in that place of fixing a lot. But okay, will you tell us a little bit more about Emergent Leaders? I know I walked through the program. My sister is in your group that you're working with right now, and I know a lot of people that have gone through Emergent Leaders. So tell us just a little bit about it.
Well, Emergent Leader is kind of growing inside out. It's working on self, and the learning is really more unlearning, because we've all kind of we're all leaders, and we're all professionals in the room, and we're also lay workers, by the way, who are professionals. And that's a nice mix too, men and women from all walks of life. So we like to build that kind of complexity, young and old, if it's possible, and then in the exchange, the we kind of work on things that we got stuck on, or we rethink how we manage ourselves and attempt to lead others. And there are conversations kind of, challenge some of the thinking, look at learning disabilities, adult learning disabilities, when it comes to leadership, and we explore models. And the thing I really like about it too is there's 4 trainers, and we couldn't be more different from each other. I think you would agree. And that, I think that's also good, because everybody in the group has their own gifts and skills and styles. And so we're not trying to create a style as much as we are as an approach to learning about self.
I want to tell you one of my biggest things I took away. And if I were in my office, I know exactly where it was, and I would pull it out and quote it, but sick kids have me at home today. So I remember distinctly creating and I'll say it wrong, but you clean it up, creating my purpose statement, my mission statement. What did you guys phrase it as? Yeah. And I think I had this like really long one, and you're like, shorten it up, Megan. But I remember my key words in there was that I wanted to be a transparent person that encourages other people towards like wellness and healing. And so that word transparent, I know, is in my mission statement, and it has been something that I have clung to, transparent and authentic. And those are pieces that I've been trying to bring to LCS since we did that. So for me, that part of Emergent Leaders was so impactful and kind of just helped me. I think I did it 3 years ago, helped me kind of hone in on what I wanted to do as an individual and how I wanted to be as a leader. So I know that part of Emergent Leaders is so helpful for me.
I'm sorry, you're just gonna and there's another piece of that is we had 10 days over 3 months, and you had time to think. And that's another thing, it's a cherished thing, our time. But if leaders had more time just to think, and so you were able to pray and focus on just a couple words, and the more they rang true for you, they're going to live there for you. And so that's another piece, and I'm glad that was helpful for you.
Yeah, it was so very helpful, and I think helped me, like I said, kind of hone in on the directions that I wanted to step in. So my dogs are barking clearly. I don't know if we've hit on everything that we wanted to chat, but I want to respect time and thank you for joining me. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We want to continue to have authentic conversations about mental health, because I believe as we have more authentic conversations and share things about ourselves, as Kurt and I have here today, we can definitely reduce the stigma around mental health. So thanks for joining me, Kurt, Mr. Bickel. It was so great to chat with you today.
It's great. You always enrich my life by conversation. It's great.
Thanks, Kurt. Have a great day.
Bye now.
Bye.